Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just a few more minutes as attendees enter the webinar before we start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Ali Baim, and I'm one of the co-PIs for the NSF-funded Research Coordination Network. And the other co-PIs and PIs on the project are here on the panel, Heseth, Rolf, and Kyle. Today is the very first webinar in a series that we're holding as part of this NSF grant. Focused on SARS-CoV-2 and wastewater. These webinars are for junior researchers, that is PhD students, postdocs, and assistant professors who are doing their service to the pandemic and likely pausing their other activities to devote their knowledge to this really important topic. So we wanted to provide a forum for people to describe what they're doing and receive recognition, and also have an opportunity for professional growth as they serve the pandemic. This webinar this week, we have two speakers, both PhD students, Devin Bowes from ASU and Phillip Wang from USC. I wanted to give a teaser that we have two more webinars coming up. We have one in a couple, we have one in a couple weeks featuring a PhD student from Stanford and a postdoc from EPFL. And then 2 weeks later, another webinar scheduled with a PhD student from University of Georgia and a postdoc from Notre Dame. So we'll be advertising those. These webinars are going to be every 2 weeks to every month. And if you're on the webinar right now and you have a junior researcher that you would like to nominate to speak at this webinar, please send a note to me or any of the co-PIs on this RCN NSF funded grant. So the way that this is going to work today is that the speakers will each have 20 minutes to describe their research projects, and we are looking for Q&A questions. So there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your webinar Zoom screen. If someone just wants to practice and write tests in there, that's great. As the speakers talk, please put your questions into the Q&A. There is a feature to upvote, I believe, the questions. So if you see a question that you like, please upvote it. A member of the panel is going to be monitoring the Q&A and asking those questions of the speaker after they finish their presentation. So with no further ado, we're going to get started. So our first speaker is Devin Bowes from ASU, a PhD student. So Devin, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Great, thank you. All right. And maybe just whoever has, Phillip, I see your screen is on. If you can see this, can you give me a thumbs up? Perfect, thank you. All right, well, thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for the nomination and invitation. My name is Devin. As stated, I am a PhD student and a graduate research assistant at ASU within the Biodesign Center for Environmental Health Engineering. I'm also a co-founder of a nonprofit project, which I'm going to talk about mostly today, called One Water, One Health. And the title that I have for you today is Wastewater Monitoring for SARS-CoV-2 in Underserved Communities, which will serve as a near real-time approach for population level health assessments in order to support data-driven decisions. So I'm unsure how familiar everybody is with wastewater monitoring or wastewater-based epidemiology, but just to briefly bring you to terms with the concept. So I want you all to recall a time that maybe you visited a doctor or some form of healthcare practitioner, and perhaps you felt ill, or maybe you just were seeking some answers in regards to your health. So what that person may have asked from you is to provide a urine or a stool or maybe a blood or saliva type of sample so that they can assess what's going on inside and then be able to provide a sound and robust diagnosis and then properly treat you so that you can start to feel better. So hold on to that concept as we then venture into the world of wastewater-based epidemiology. So instead of just one person or one sample, we are looking at an entire population at one time. And instead of just a urine or a stool type of matrix, we are looking at raw or untreated wastewater making its way into a wastewater treatment plant. So this type of sample provides us community health information, the same way that a doctor would be able to assess what's going on with that one individual by analyzing their urine. We can do the same thing for many people through raw wastewater. So this is seen to be very cost effective. Again, with a single sample, you can get a snapshot of what's going on within an entire population or a community. It is considered anonymous. You are unable to tell, or the researcher is unable to tell one person from the next when looking at a sample. So we don't know who's contributing what, we just know that it's composited. And it is considered to be in near real time. And what that means is by the time I'm collecting the sample in the field and bringing it into the lab and processing and analyzing it, that turnaround time to provide data is much shorter in comparison to other more traditional or conventional data sets, which could take months or possibly years. So we're talking about a matter of weeks, depending on what the compound of interest is. So we look for various different biomarkers or compounds that are indicative of human health. So you could basically consider us doctors of entire cities, no big deal. And the type of analytical instrumentation that is more traditionally used for this type of work is liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry. Although when we are talking about SARS-CoV-2, we're going to just modify that a little bit. Okay, so now we know, we have a basic understanding of WBE, and I know it's difficult to think about other epidemics, but with COVID-19 on our minds right now, but I want us to just put that aside and think about the opioid epidemic, which is what we've been dealing with for the past couple of decades now. And our team at the Biodesign Center for Environmental Health Engineering partnered with the city of Tempe in a unique academic municipal partnership in order to monitor for opioid usage throughout the entire city of Tempe using wastewater. Now, the reason I bring this up is to provide background for how we got to where we are today with SARS-CoV-2 monitoring. Now, just to bring you to terms with what we're looking at here. So we started collecting wastewater from 5 separate catchment areas throughout the city of Tempe in May of 2018. And we finally were able to actually launch the dashboard in February of 2019. So to bring you to terms with what is shown on your screen is we have 4 opioids of interest here set forth by the city of Tempe. And each one, just to familiarize you with kind of how you can interact with the dashboard here, is each panel, or wherever available, we're able to monitor for the parent, which is what is ingested, as well as the metabolite, And this is important because it gives us some insight on what might be simply just dumped down the drain and what is actually being consumed. Now, each bar on the graph here corresponds with the color that is shown for the various catchment areas on the map here. And we're able to assess over time. So this is a publicly facing dashboard, first of its kind at the neighborhood level. And you can play around with the dates up in the upper right-hand corner here. So shown in milligrams per day per 1,000 capita, over time, you can see the various trends on how these opioids are being used, again, in the various catchment areas and then throughout the city as a whole. So why is this important, and why might monitoring wastewater for opioid use, or really for anything, really be important in terms of public health? Well, every month prior to COVID-19, we would physically sit at City Hall and talk with members of the City of Tempe and various stakeholders in strategic management, community health and community outreach, fire, medical rescue, and then various engineers and water utility. And what we would do is literally have the dashboard displayed up on large screens and talk about what it means and what can we do now that we have more information on the health of the city. So this helps to inform various educational interventions, different strategies for mitigation, and even for preparedness and emergency response, for example, carrying antidote out in the field, such as naloxone or Narcan. We would also talk about data interpretation. Since this is a publicly facing dashboard, we have to have several discussions prior to posting data up on how might the public see this and what are some types of potential fallbacks that we might encounter. We also discuss in expansion. So beyond opioids, what can we do to utilize this same tool and in order to safeguard and protect public health? All right, so now we're coming back into the context of the COVID-19 global pandemic. And as we're all aware, this has left a great burden on our society as a whole throughout the world, over 34 million confirmed cases and over 1 million deaths. And we've witnessed some major challenges within our healthcare system, again, domestically and globally, especially in terms of testing access and capacity and lags in data reporting. And because of these just kind of innate limitations, we are left with many unknowns and gaps within throughout the world in terms of viral spread and how many people are infected, and more specifically, folks of vulnerable populations or marginalized communities are shown to be, statistically speaking, more severely impacted. So this is where my team at One Water, One Health decided to step in. So just to provide a brief background, we were established in late 2019 when we were awarded the Innovation Prize from the J.M. Kaplan Fund. And at first we had a lot of ideas. We knew that there was a lot of inequity. We knew that there was a lot of issues in terms of environmental quality and then subsequent human health impact from that. And we just couldn't find our right footing and where we could start. And when the COVID-19 global pandemic really started to kick off, we thought this is exactly how we can help. So our mission as a whole is to serve and protect vulnerable communities and environmental quality. And with COVID-19, we just put out a call on our website and said that if you can basically send us a sample, we will provide free analysis for SARS-CoV-2 in your wastewater and provide data for you as soon as possible. And what you're looking at here on the right-hand side of your screen are the states that are actively participating in COVID-19 wastewater testing with our team, with One Water, One Health currently. So over roughly around 15 states right now is who we're representing. So I want you to also think about just a couple of slides ago when I was showing you the opioid dashboard. So concurrently, as we were collecting samples from throughout the US and abroad, we were also collecting throughout the city of Tempe. And so what we're looking at here is the same map, similar to the opioid map, except we were able to break it up into 3 additional areas, so 8 total areas. And along the graph here, we're looking at genome copies of the virus per liter of wastewater, so a concentration. And again, each color corresponds to the various catchment areas. And over time, so I actually toggled the date to reflect back from May 1st to show that our wastewater data is reflective of what happened in the community. So during the lockdown period, we were not able to quantify the concentration of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater. And then as the restrictions began to lift, we started to see that to be immediately reflected essentially in our wastewater streams. There were a lot of things that we learned throughout this experience. And again, this is from weekly monitoring. About 3 days a week, we collect samples throughout the city of Tempe. So since the beginning of April. And so this has been a very labor-intensive, but extremely rewarding project, especially for the reason that we were able to identify hotspots, such as the town of Guadalupe. So the town of Guadalupe, I have outlined here in red, is a very small subcatchment of only about 6,500 people. And although it is not a formal tribal community, the majority of the town of Guadalupe consists of members of the Pascua-Yaqui tribe. And generally speaking, this little town is classified as working class, middle class, and unfortunately we're unable to take advantage of shelter-in-place orders. Basically, these people had to go to work in order to feed their families. And so we were right away seeing really high spikes of SARS-CoV-2 in their wastewater, and thought we really need to inform them of what's going on. So we were able to connect with the appropriate personnel in order to properly inform them of their SARS-CoV-2 wastewater concentrations, and they started to implement the appropriate intervention strategies. And again, as you can see, as soon as they started to promote more awareness and education, handing out flyers, increasing testing capacity, they started to see declined concentrations in wastewater. And they received a lot of publicity around this. So first and foremost, they were getting a lot of attention based on the amount, the severity of the viral presence within their community, and then also how they were able to very quickly decrease the amount in their throughout the town of Guadalupe based on our wastewater information. So this was a huge learning experience for us. It was a great win, and we feel very proud to have been a part of it. Something else that is particularly interesting, especially for vulnerable populations, is understanding that wastewater monitoring can truly serve as an early warning system for viral presence. So this is something that I'm working on in terms of data for generating a manuscript right now, along with several other people of my team. And basically what we're seeing here are wastewater viral loads per day of SARS-CoV-2, shown with COVID-related hospitalizations throughout the greater Phoenix area. And based on statistical calculations, in this context, so comparing wastewater to COVID-related hospitalizations, we are seeing a 16-day lag where the wastewater data are preceding the hospitalization data. So I'm working on comparing this now to other data sets to truly provide that type of early signal so that we can work to better prepare our communities, increase a more rapid resource deployment type of program, increase awareness and education, and ultimately mitigate spread. So finally, and this is much newer, we are working on doing some wastewater monitoring on tribal communities, specifically for SARS-CoV-2. And we're working with a couple of undisclosed Native American communities right now. But again, we know that several of these communities have been very severely impacted. And so they need a rapid and comprehensive data source in order to best inform their interventions and, again, decrease or completely eradicate viral presence within the community. And that's me wearing a funky smock. So that is all that I have for you today. I thank you again for your time and attention. I want to acknowledge first and foremost ASU and the Biodesign Center for Environmental Health Engineering. Also my team with One Water, One Health. This is definitely it takes a village to do this kind of work. And as Ali mentioned, yes, a lot of things have been pushed aside. So this has been extremely rewarding, and I am very pleased to be part of this team. So Ralph Halden is the founder of One Water, One Health, and I work alongside Nivi Biani as a co-founder, and then Allison Binsfeld, Jillian Wright, and Diane Price all work in tandem to make this project happen. So I encourage you all to please check us out and follow us along on Twitter. You are also able to contact us or just check out what we're doing on onewateronehealth.org. If you have any specific questions for me with One Water, One Health or ASU EHE, you're welcome to email me here. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Devin. There's a couple questions here that are related, so I'm going to combine them.
Sure.
So one is, you are making this publicly available dashboard, and so there are some questions about what are the concerns you might have had from the public, and also, you know, is there anything you learned from the opioid dashboard that you applied to the SARS-CoV-2 dashboard as far as public concerns or any fallbacks that you could have applied when you made this other dashboard public?
Yeah, these are great questions, and it's super important, right? Because by making these data public, you are opening up the doors to, you know, a certain level of risk for misinterpretation and it kind of falling back. So at least in terms of the opioid dashboard, there was a lot, as you saw, a lot of buildup, a lot of time that was spent in data generation and analysis before the dashboard was actually went live. And from that, we felt very much well equipped to be able to very rapidly create the COVID-19 dashboard. So there were differences, however, in terms of the opioid data. You know, we have to be very careful with how we display, who might be doing, taking the opioids, or in what areas are we seeing higher amounts. And so it's a different context. It tends to have kind of a different underlying assumption when looking at it with SARS-CoV-2. It's a little bit easier to digest that there's more of a viral presence in various communities in terms of comparing it to the opioid data. But there are plenty of conversations, daily that went into how are we going to display these data without causing any type of panic within the community. So all of those considerations were certainly put into place before we posted anything.
Thanks. And so are you sampling on-site wastewater systems in the tribal areas, or are they decentralized? What's kind of the minimum size of a system that you're currently sampling?
So there's not a whole lot that I can say at this time, but we are able to collect basically just grabs on site on various communities in terms of the Native American communities.
Okay, and then there was a question, if you can, in 5 minutes, elaborate on your sample processing, so your concentration method, your process controls, and what molecular assays you're using.
So we are employing kind of a typical type of process. So we collect raw wastewater from various types of communities, whether it was from maybe just directly from the pipe, or maybe at a wastewater treatment plant. We then put it through typical filtration, concentration, and extractions, and we run qPCR in order to quantify.
Awesome. And then there's this other follow-up, I guess, to that is kind of what is the limit of detection and your quote unquote threshold for alarm?
Yeah, let me go back to, so if you can see, might be better on here. So we have our quantifiable detection limit set at 5,000 copies per liter of wastewater. And I don't know if you're able to see the dotted line there, but our kind of threshold of alarm is pretty much dependent on the catchment area that it's referring to. So obviously anything over our quantifiable limit, we definitely want to take a deeper investigation into that and kind of take it from there. It's all contextual within each catchment area.
Great. Let's see. Oh gosh, I lost it. Okay, can you, is there any way you could look at your previous samples to determine COVID-19, whether or not it was circulating before we thought it was? So some of the samples you collected for the opioid study, whether or not you could analyze for COVID-19 in those samples?
Yeah, so unfortunately with RNA viruses, as I'm sure many people are experiencing, there's a major risk of degradation. So as soon as we basically archive a sample, you are freezing it, and that is, it basically causes you to render the RNA virus undetectable at that point in time. So unfortunately with the samples that we collected for opioids specifically, which were, have been years now, we did investigate into seeing if we were able to detect SARS-CoV-2, and it's been rendered unsuccessful thus far. So we're looking into ways to see if we can kind of get that retrospective type of analysis set in place.
Heseth, I think we have time for one more short question, and then we'll have to move on.
Yeah, I guess I'll pick this one. So for Guadalupe, what implementations did they put in place to help reduce the COVID-19 cases?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty amazing. They really came together and basically created their own little task force, and I think they even called it like the COVID-19 task force. And it was pretty typical. So facial covering mandates. They started to post flyers everywhere. They started to increase their testing capacity, and really it was just the overall increasing of awareness. So talking about it, and they didn't even know that it was really so prevalent within their tiny community in a secluded way. So by educating them and informing them on what we were seeing in their wastewater streams and implementing those types of tactics, as you can see, it decreased that viral presence quite significantly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devin. Great job.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so just a reminder, I think Rolf is going to dismiss all the questions that we have there for Devin. And then please put your questions for Phillip after I introduce him into the Q&A. So I noticed that some people were putting their questions into the chat. And I just wanted to remind you that we aren't monitoring the chat for questions, we're monitoring the Q&A. And also we have the ability to upvote questions. So if you like a question upvoted and it goes to the very top of the list, and Rolf, who is monitoring the questions, will be able to see all the questions that are upvoted when we start the Q&A. So that's how that works. And I'm really happy to see we have 63 attendees at this point. So that's great. All right, so our next speaker is Phillip Wang. Phillip, you can go ahead and turn on your camera, or I guess you can leave your camera off if there's an internet connectivity concern. Phillip is a PhD student at USC. And Phillip, you can go ahead and share your screen. Devin did a great job staying on time, so I did not have to interrupt her and remind her of her time limit. But just a reminder for Phillip that I will put my timer on, and if 20 minutes comes up, I will remind you of your time limit.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Phillip Wang, And I'm a fourth year PhD student in Adam Smith's research lab at USC. And today I'd like to talk to you about like kind of recent ongoing project, which is the wastewater surveillance of SARS-CoV-2 in the greater Los Angeles area. So before going further, I'd like to mention that this is actually part of a national collaboration to develop relationships between wastewater and public health data. Now, this is being done in 4 metropolitan areas, Washington, D.C., Raleigh, Houston, and Los Angeles. And you can see on this graph here, on the y-axis is new cases of COVID-19 per 100,000 people plotted over from April to August, that for the 4 cities that I mentioned, they have different patterns. So it's interesting to patterns of kind of cases and when that occurs. So it'll be interesting to see if we can kind of find a relationship between SARS-CoV-2 levels in water and public health data with varying types of sewage systems, degrees of centralization, and public health data. Now, this project collectively will survey over 45 treatment plants, and then each of the plants will serve in a range between like 2,700 people to 4 million residents, and the total population surveyed will be over 15 million people. Now, this will be done at 4 universities: Howard University, University of Southern California, and then NC State, and then Rice University. Okay, so I'd like to mention that today's data and talk will be primarily focused on Los Angeles County. And then here on the left is kind of California split up by counties. And then you can see here in red is Los Angeles County. And LA County is a good spot to kind of do this kind of study to figure out the relationship between wastewater and public health data, clinical data. It has the highest number of SARS-CoV-2 cases of all counties in the United States. So in the table to the right here, you have the top 10 counties of confirmed COVID-19 cases pulled from the Johns Hopkins website. And you can see from the top, at the top sits LA with 270,299 cases as of yesterday, I believe. And behind that, less than 100,000 cases, 100,000 cases fewer, is Miami-Dade, Florida. Now, so the question is, wastewater surveillance of SARS-CoV-2, how does it relate to public health data, right? So this here is a graph of the public health data of kind of 2 things: the positivity rate over a rolling 7-day average was shown in blue, and the number of positive tests over a rolling 7-day range as well. We decided to show kind of positivity rate because we can see an increase here during this the early time period here. There was kind of a limited number of tests in the LA area, so a positivity rate was kind of a better gauge of the community level. But what I want to mention is that we started sampling a little later, more in mid to late April, where the number of kits was not the limiting factors. And then another thing to point out is that both positivity rate and number of tests were at its highest around late June to mid-July. So we're going to see later kind of how that relates to the SARS-CoV-2 gene copy levels in the LA wastewater system. All right, so to get a representative sample of LA County's wastewater system, we chose 6 water reclamation plants, 2 residential areas, and 2 hospitals. So on the map to your right here is LA County with the locations plotted with the names. So you got, and the table here kind of summarizing the locations in column 1. Sample frequency at each location. So we either sample it once per week or twice per week. And then the sample type. So for most of these, we sample composite influent samples, but for Hyperion and joint water, we sample primary solids. And we don't sample primary solids from kind of these 4 wastewater treatment plants to the right mainly because through the pipe, the solids feed into the joint water pollution control plant. So by collecting the primary solids there, we kind of get the other 4 as well. And then Santa Monica is the residential area and hospital wastewater samples. So here is kind of LA County again, but showing you the catchment area of the 3 wastewater treatment plants I want to talk to you about today. So it's Hyperion, which treats 270 million gallons per day and serves 4 million people. Joint Water Pollution Control Plant, which treats 260 million gallons per day and serves 3.5 million people. And San Jose Creek, which treats 100 million gallons per day and serves 100 million people. So you can see these are pretty big or really big wastewater treatment plants that we're talking about. So, so a little bit before I move on, I want to talk about kind of the method development we did for SARS-CoV-2 quantification in wastewater. So this here is kind of an overview of all the kind of different variables we played around with and to test what kind of affects quantification of a surrogate or a process recovery virus, RNA, which is the bovine coronavirus, attenuated bovine coronavirus. And at the start, we always take our sample, a composite wastewater sample. We add 10 to 7 bovine coronavirus gene copies per liter. And then we use HA filtration, which is electronegative filtration concentrated. And then before filtration, we either condition the samples to pH 4 with 25 millimoles of magnesium chloride, or we leave it neutral at, and then condition 25 millimoles of magnesium chloride. So that is kind of the conditioning variable we play with. And then once we take the filter, once it's filtered, we take the filter and we put it in a 2 ml bead and mix it with 1 of 3 lysis beads. So here you'll see 3 types of beads listed: the garnet, silicon carbide, and zirconium. And these 3 differ in surface morphology, sharpness, and size, right? So they can all affect viral lysis differently. So we want to see which one is there a significant difference between different types. And then we took the extracts and we kind of also use 3 different extraction kits to see extraction efficiencies, which one works the best in our hands. And then we did a 2-step RT-qPCR to target bovine coronavirus, and then use those data to calculate bovine coronavirus recovery efficiency. In addition, we also tested for reverse transcription inhibition and qPCR inhibition. All right. So here is kind of the data for our initial run. It has a lot of variables going on, but the take-home message, if you ever get lost, is that it's less than 5% bovine coronavirus recovery across varying sample types, volumes, and extraction kits. Okay, so let me walk you through this. We tested 2 different kinds of extraction kits, 2 different wastewater types, and then 4 different sample volumes. The M here stands for Maxwell Total Viral DNA RNA Kit, and then wastewater treatment plant 1 at 10 mils per a sample volume. So you can see 10, 25, 50, 100. And then the darker blue here is Maxwell again, but it's a second wastewater treatment plant. And then Q represents the Qiagen all-prep power vial. And again, it's wastewater treatment plant 1 at 10, 25, 50, 100, or wastewater treatment plant 2, 10, 25, 50, 100. Now, I plotted the y-axis as CQs because that's kind of the reference that the qPCR machine generates. So it stands for the kind of critical threshold of detection. So once you pass a CQ, that's kind of tells you, you can back calculate that how much gene copies you have. And roughly a CQ of 30, based on our dosage and concentration method, is 5% bovine coronavirus recovery. So after all that, like I said, the take-home message is less than 5% bovine coronavirus recovery across all sample types, volumes, extraction kits, right? And maybe Maxwell has slightly better extraction efficiency than Qiagen. So possible reasons for low bovine coronavirus recovery. So we listed 6 possible reasons as the most likely culprits. So working backwards. We're dealing with wastewater here, so qPCR inhibition and reverse transcription inhibition are common culprits. So we set up a qPCR inhibition assay. So here we took 6 samples that previously shown that bovine coronavirus recovery was very low. I know there's like different types of variables we play with: bead beating time, direct extraction volume, incubation period. But the main point is that these all exhibited less than 5% of coronavirus recovery. And then we either, into a qPCR mix, we either a template or our known DNA, which is a plasmid PUC19, and then our positive is a qPCR mix plus water and PUC19. Now, if there's qPCR inhibition, then the critical detection cycle, the CQ value, should increase since they're preventing the amplification of DNA. But as you can see here, there's no significant difference between our test and our positive. So we determined there's no qPCR inhibition. And next, we move up or down the process, upper the process, and did a reverse transcription inhibition assay, which is similar, except that we did reverse transcription mix plus template plus our known RNA that we're adding in, and did reverse transcription. And the positive is a reverse transcription mix plus water plus our known Hep G RNA. And then we compared the CQ value to positive. Now you may notice, like, why did we have an increase or decrease in CQ, increase in Hep G concentration compared to positive? Well, it's, in the literature, often they cite that reverse transcription or reverse transcriptase has higher activity in with a background RNA around 50 nanograms per microliter, I believe. And then, so which is consistent with what we have here, where we add the Hep G in a background of the sample compared to just Hep G with water, which is why, well, higher reverse transcriptase activity could explain the increase or decrease in CQ. The main point takeaway was like reverse transcription inhibition and qPCR inhibition was not the reason why for low bovine coronavirus recovery. So next, we moved up to lysis bead efficiency and extraction kit efficiency. So on the left here was the 3 types of beads that I talked about before. So you got the silicon carbide, the zirconium, and the garnet. And then between samples, we didn't see a significant difference. And then all 3 samples had a CQ value of greater than 30, which is 5%, less than 5% recovery. And looking at extraction kit, we moved from the total viral RNA DNA kit and compared it to a RNA specific kit, simply RNA kit, also by Maxwell. And again, we didn't see a significant difference, and both of them had lower than a 5% recovery. So we next moved to the heat inactivation and sample condition method, and hit something, yeah. So we had 2 conditions going on. We either take the sample and we certified it to pH 4, or we left it at neutral. And then we either added the bovine coronavirus before heat treatment or after heat treatment, right? Before heat treatment, after heat treatment. So at the bottom table here, I'm going to represent, these numbers represent bovine recovery percentage and not loss. So this is actually what we carry as recovered. So you can see just from heat treating it, we see a significant drop, or heat inactivation of the sample, we see a significant drop, right? Around 20% here and around 53% in the neutral condition. And then between neutral and sample, neutral conditions seem to have higher recovery. So our highest recovery in the neutral condition after heat treatment had a 64.60% bovine coronavirus recovery. However, based on our IPC approval for our lab, we are not able to bypass the heat inactivation step to work with the samples. So we are continuing to heat inactivate it, but learning from the method development, this is our process workflow moving forward. We spike in bovine coronavirus, heat inactivate it, we'll condition it with 25 millimoles of magnesium chloride. we'll sample it, a fixed volume. We're going to use the corneal bead and then the simply RNA blood kit. And then we're going to move on two-step to a one-step one, RT-qPCR, which is multiplexed to the N1 gene or N2 gene. And then it uses two internal controls to assess for qPCR inhibition, which is the hex channel, and then a reverse transcription inhibition, and it amplifies a PMMOV, or pepper mild model virus. Yeah, and I'll talk about a little right now. So we have to heat inactivate it, so we can't really use bovine coronavirus as a biomarker for normalization. So we're currently looking at PMMOV as a potential biomarker for normalization. And a little background is that it's a plant pathogen commonly introduced to humans through dietary means and is used as an indicator for human fecal pollution. It's ubiquitous in wastewater treatment plants. It's often present, very often present in more than 1 million copies per mil raw wastewater and low seasonal variability. So on the bottom here, bottom graph here, I'll show you the PMMOV concentration that we measured in the 3 wastewater treatment plants, San Jose, Joint Water, and Hyperion. And the y-axis here is gene copies per liter of raw wastewater. And as you can see, all 3 exhibited around 10 to the 9 gene copies per liter, and then stay within that range throughout our sampling period. So it is rather consistent and in high concentration. But this was a rather new kind of candidate, and we're still exploring the option of this one and looking to see if it fits. So the data I'm going to present you, kind of the rest of the slide, is not normalized and just kind of just quantified N1, N2 gene copies. And then here, I'm going to show you kind of a combined log scale representation of N1, N2 gene copies from all 3 wastewater treatment plants. But as you can see, it's hard to assess kind of changes at the log scale. But it's relatively stable in high concentrations, which is kind of consistent with the number of high cases we have in LA. But if we decide to not plot it, or if we don't plot it against the log scale, and then we can see the changes much better and try to correlate these variabilities with the positive tests of the public health data. So I'm going to show you the Hyperion one first. So the Hyperion influent wastewater, based on our data, it does not correlate well with a positive test on the 7-day average. And the red here is the N1 gene, sorry, and then the blue line, darker blue line, is N2 gene, and the light blue one is the positive test on the 7-day average. And here in the beige, you say same-day processing. Here is when we started collecting samples, filtering and extracting all on the same day, and that's why you see a slight spike. And the correlations we did was all before the data points before same-day processing. Yeah. And then we can also do it with same-day processing. We just can't combine all the data points together. So next, SARS-CoV levels in the San Jose Creek wastewater show a strong correlation with the positive test on the 7-day average, with correlations of 0.738 and 0.778. The p-value is less than 0.05. And then joint water, if we look at that, it has a moderate correlation. So each wastewater treatment plant kind of has its own pattern you have to look out for, things like. So 0.457 and 0.486. So next, we looked at kind of daily wastewater samples and compared to daily positive rates and try to find a correlation. So we looked at it for the joint water over a 1-week period. We noticed that we didn't see any correlation at comparing number of positive tests that day with the number of N1, N2 gene copies that day. However, like if we shift it, like the sample day lags the number of positive tests that we compared to by 2 days, right? So we compare the N1, N2 gene copies of the sample, and 2 days later, the number of positive tests, we see a moderate to strong correlation of 0.509 correlation coefficient for N1 and 0.39 coefficient for N2. And this is kind of consistent with kind of what we read about like wastewater being kind of a early, can show signs of increase in community cases. Yeah.
Phillip, we've reached 20 minutes, so you'll need to wrap it up.
For sure. Yeah. Almost done. Yeah. So, well, it's just like that kind of is kind of end of the wastewater kind of data. And I kind of just want to mention the kind of what USC is so interested in this project for campus surveillance. And then right now there's a very limited number of students residing in one of the dorms. So there's like 93 residents. So they're going to take this opportunity, and also the fact that other universities like University of Arizona and Syracuse are doing this with success. They're going to start a pilot project with 3 samplers at 3 sites, and a little bit, and they're going to sample 3 times a week. And if the data looks good, and then we will expand it to more students once the campus opens up a little bit more. Yeah. All right. So I know I ran over a little bit, but so here is kind of the faces to the names. So of course I'm not doing this by myself. Dealing with the postdoc Ali, and a former postdoc Saeed, and a first-year PhD student Connor, and Adam, our PI, which is without him none of this would be possible. So with that, I will end my talk and answer any questions that I can.
Great.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot, Phillip. That's wonderful. We got a lot of questions come in, so maybe we start with this one here. How are you communicating your results of testing? I think that relates to the Hyperion data primarily. So it's a very large facility in the nation. How do you communicate, to whom and how?
How do we communicate? There is a representative from Hyperion, and we just through email exchange and a lot of paperwork. Yeah, that's how we communicate. Yeah.
So the data gets shared with specific stakeholders and decision makers, but not with the public. And
yeah, we'll send it to Hyperion, and then they decide what to do with the data. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then maybe since this is a very large plan and you have the opportunity to work in a very large city, do you know what the average residence time of the wastewater is that you're drawing from at Hyperion?
Oh man, sorry, not off the top of my head. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of information to know, so don't worry about it. We have more questions for you. Here's another one. What are the challenges of comparing same-day positivity with WBE data?
WEB or WBE? Oh.
So WBE data. So same-day positivity testing, right? I think the question might be related to that sick people go and get tested, right? We have a limited number of tests. There might be delays in when people go and get tested, and WBE sees things potentially immediately. So I think there's a question of are we comparing the same populations, and also do we expect to have a shift between those two?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so you always need like a good amount of people getting tested. I mean, so the challenges will just be, I can't. I think the challenge will just be enough data points to see trends. Yeah, just having enough sample days to see trends. Yeah, would be the biggest security blanket you have against this. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we can relate so much with you because we get asked questions all the time that are super tough because they require knowledge from different disciplines. And so it's a really difficult field to navigate where, you know, experts come from different areas. And you have to know a lot of information. Unfortunately, a lot of it isn't known. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the answers we're seeking are not with anyone. So we are, and you are in good company here. Maybe another one, the campus study has 93 inhabitants. So 93 people on campus right now. have you looked at what the positivity rate is and your chances of catching something? You know, I'm not sure whether you do grab sampling or composite sampling, and maybe also ethical issues. What is your protocol for monitoring a very small community?
Yeah, so right now USC is 100% online classes, and those 93 residents are mostly athletes. Right? So they're getting tested quite frequently just to stay with the team. As terms of ethical, I mean, we're getting kind of wastewater samples from an auto sampler through the pipes. Yeah, so I don't see any ethical issues in that regard. Yeah, good. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We are, there's more questions, but we are running out of time. So I think I'd like to thank you, Phillip, and Devin as well. And I think I hand it back to Ali, who can add some final words.
Yeah, thank you so much to the speakers. Great job, very complimentary talk. So congratulations on great presentations. We have recorded the talks and we'll make them available, and we look forward to seeing everybody at the next webinar, which is in 2 weeks. So thank you for attending and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Everyone have a great day.
Bye-bye.